Hello and welcome to the second edition of the Education Magazine show. And before I start, I should tell you that we have a new studio, a fabulous new education studio. What do you think of this? Education Magazine. And we are going to be broadcasting from this studio, which is magnificent. I really like the colours. What do you think? Anyway, the purpose of our broadcast today, what are we going to be covering? We're going to be talking to a very famous sports star who has been through a terrible crisis as a child, and we're going to be finding out all about her journey and the great success that she achieved. And we're going to also be talking to a parent who is himself, on his own admission, he was a bully himself, having been bullied and now going through a crisis in regard to his own son, which is a real worry for him at the moment. And we're going to be talking also to Charlotte Hadfield, our wonderful barrister who is resident with us, who's going to be talking on the Education Magazine about the latest stories that are enthralling, quite frankly, because there's a lot been happening in the last few weeks. And we're going to be joined in the studio by Rachel Rees-Grafton, who is one of our lawyers at Sinclair's Law. And she will be telling you the latest news about what's going on an announcement, in fact, made by the government in relation to LGBT funding in schools. And she will also be telling us about, I think, what goes on in Scotland. And I think she has a message to relay, which is that things are better there, apparently, for those who are experiencing bullying. So that's going to be quite something to listen to. And recently I had the absolute pleasure of meeting Gisele Shaw, who is a fabulous, not only is she a fabulous sports star, a wrestling British champion, but she is also a model and an actor. And we were talking to her. I had the pleasure of talking to her about what she's been doing recently, and also talking to her about what she had been doing and the experiences that she had when she was at school. So that's going to be on the show too. And in fact, that's going to be the first thing that we're going to be dealing with in the show, Gisele Shaw. And I caught up with her a few weeks ago when I visited her at her home. Let's watch that video and see how I got on meeting Gisele and talking to her about her experiences at school when she was in Canada. Gisele Shaw now leads a glamorous life. An actor and sports star who has become the undisputed British pro female wrestling champion. She appears totally confident in the ring, but life was not always like that. In fact, she spoke to me today about her school life experience. Gisele Shaw, thank you so much for coming and joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And what a world you live in. You're now, I think, the British champion, the Rev Pro undisputed British champion.
That is correct. Wrestling. Yeah, and so it's the Revolution Pro undisputed British women's champion.
Wow. So you must be bashing them on stage.
I love it. You know, I've always wanted to do it since I was a kid, and Here I am living my dream.
And you're also an actor.
I am, yes.
And you've been in all sorts of different
Yes,
things.
I actually worked for Warner Brothers, I think it was like a couple months ago. I can't say what it is yet.
No, exciting.
Yes,
exciting.
But when it is out, then I'll definitely, let you know.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we're all going to watch you on the big screen then. In the cinema? We're going to be in the cinema?
I can't say where it is. I can't say where it is. But okay, but I'll definitely keep you updated.
And so what brought you into wrestling? Was it I know you love the job and you keep yourself so fit and you're fighting all these people and winning so many matches. I suppose you never lose, do you, these days?
I mean, I try to keep up appearances. But I grew up watching wrestling with my family, with my grandparents, my parents, and my sisters. So it was something that I've always wanted to do since I was a kid, but I didn't really know that that was something that you can achieve, like you watch Hollywood actors and wrestlers and you think, like those are jobs that, it's just not, it's not your everyday job,
No,
right?
quite.
So there's like, I didn't know how to go into it, but I turned my early 20s, and I met people who directed me to the right path, and then I got trained, and the rest was history.
So did you just fall into it, or was it something?
Yeah, so I went to the gym with a friend, and his friend said, "Hey, would you like to come to a wrestling show?" And then I thought to myself, like, is it Olympic wrestling, or is this like a WWE style wrestling, which I was accustomed to? And they said it's going to be WWE style, so I said, you know what, count me in. And then as soon as I went there, I just fell in love with it, and then I just wanted to train. So
it's fantastic. And I suppose too, you're quite well known. Everyone in Britain who is watching wrestling will know you. Probably they'll come and see you.
Hopefully, I mean, like, I did come here to try and make a name for myself, so crossing my fingers that they do. But I have traveled around the world, and Japan, United States, Canada, Ireland, and the UK. So it's been really fun.
So the world for you now as a wrestling star, what do you hope to achieve in the future, do you think?
I mean, hopefully one day that I would sign with a major company, but I'm not going to think about, the end goal. I'm just going to focus on bettering myself and the journey. So
yeah, get cracking with that agent.
Yes.
Get that agent sorted.
Hopefully.
And I think you were brought up, weren't you, in Canada? You were born in Canada, is that right?
No, so I was born in the Philippines.
Philippines.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm Spanish Filipina. And then we moved to Canada when I was about 12 or 13.
Yeah.
And then I grew up and, I grew up in Canada, yes.
Did anything, I mean, we're talking today to our audience about the topic we're going to be covering in the Education magazine is bullying.
Right.
And the problems that are encountered by so many children up and down the country. And of course, it's not unique to the United Kingdom. It's also pretty, prevalent in other parts of the world.
Exactly.
Tell us a little bit about, was that something, your school experiences, did that shape you into where you are today?
Definitely. When I was a kid, coming from the Philippines, I was very different. It's not your everyday norm in Canada. And then having to move to Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, it's very remote. So it's not every day that you'd see someone different per se. And then, so I went to school, and when I moved to Canada, I was already going into high school, so I didn't have any friends like everybody did, when they went to elementary school. So I didn't know anybody. I was fresh meat, and I was different because I liked wrestling.
So you liked it even when you were a child?
I loved it. I loved it so much, and so to them that was different already because I mean I don't want to say like it's like my skin color or something, but because I am different and non-white, that was very different to them. But yeah, no, I did experience a lot of bullying when I was a kid, and I don't know if you wanted me to give you examples.
Well, I mean, not if it's too hard for you, but
no,
you can talk about it.
No, yeah, no, definitely. I know there's one time when I was in the bus, and these kids behind me just mock me and laugh at me, and then they would pour liquids like orange juice,
really?
Water, all over me, and
Really?
And I've had just people at school just like push me around, and it wasn't the best place to grow up, but I just really thought to myself that I can do better, and I just shouldn't have to mind these people because it's temporary. I'm gonna grow up, and then I'm gonna follow my dreams and get out of town and hopefully be successful one day.
How old would you have been then? Would it have been 12, 13, is it? Oh.
Yeah, I was 12, 13, and it was pretty much forced to grow up and think that this is just temporary. And
did you tell your parents what was going on?
I mean, I didn't want to tell my parents because it's just my parents moved our family to Canada so that we can have a better life.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for me to even just say, hey mom, dad, like like school's not going well because I'm getting my butt kicked. So, but no, I do the butt kicking now in the ring. So, but yeah, no, it was rough, but it did teach me, a valuable lesson. And
was it relentless? Was it every day or?
Yes.
It really was.
For 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So
And physical and emotional bullying.
exactly. And, like mentally as well, right? Like it's draining, having to go to school when you think, oh, you know what, one day I want to become a doctor, or a nurse. That's where, like mostly what my parents wanted me to be. But, you can't really focus going to school having, these kids just torture you every single day. So
if you didn't speak to your parents, who did you turn to? Did you turn to anyone? Did you turn to the school?
no, I did, but I mean, I feel like there wasn't really a lot that was done, so I just kind of had to keep to myself and be me and just, try to do the 4 years and get out.
Well, quite. I mean, so when you turned to the school, did you, do you remember what they actually did, or if anything?
I mean, there was disciplinary actions, yes, but, so what, like, you suspend them for, let's say, 3 days, 4 days, and then after 4 days, then what? They come back.
There may be a lot of children watching this show.
Yes.
Who might be experiencing this horror.
Mm-hmm.
What would you like to tell them if a child like you were
Mm-hmm.
going through this terribly unpleasant experience? What was it, if you had to say something to them, what would you want to say to them?
I would tell them that it definitely does get better. Focus on your dreams, focus on your goals, use that negativity and turn it into positive, and use that as fuel to achieve what you want to achieve and achieve greatness. It's not a reflection. What they do is not a reflection of who you are. It's just that these people are maybe going through something, hard in their life, and they need an outlet. Unfortunately, I was the outlet, or they may be the outlet. But try and tell your parents, try and tell your teachers.
But did you fear that if you told your parents, they would perhaps go to the school and complain, and then the bullying would get worse? Was that something?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. If you tell, an adult and say, you know what, like I'm being bullied and stuff, like it'll just get worse because now you've tattled on them. Now they're getting in trouble. So that means they're just going to come twice as hard.
And did that happen at all to you when you spoke to the staff?
It did, yeah. But, you learn to have thicker skin. And, you just power through it. And I feel like, not everyone is obvious. Like for me now to talk about it, I think back and I say, you know what, like it really took a lot of mental strength to do that. But I feel like it's really helped me as a person now, to growing up, like that I experienced that. So it's made me a little bit tougher now.
Yeah. And do you remember how you felt in your lowest moments when, because there'd be children out there who might be, watching this?
Definitely. I have thought about just, I don't know if I can say it, but just like ending everything. And it's just because it's terrible, like why would I want to go through it? And it's just not for me at the time. It just wasn't worth it. Like I don't have anything to look forward to. And a lot of kids these days, I do see that in news, and it's very horrific. But like what I can say is stay strong and stay positive, and just block them out. And
I guess lots of children who might be watching might also ask, what would you do if you saw those bullies now? You're the champion wrestler.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I do, like some people, they grow out of that phase, and some people have messaged me and apologized. And,
have they? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can forgive them and stuff, but you can't forget that because, that's part of who I am, and that's part of who, of them as well. But, you try to be the bigger person and just move on, really.
And so when you took that experience, do you sometimes think when you're in the ring that sort of motivates you even today, do you think?
Of course, yeah. I just think about something, something that was, it's important in my life that I always go back to that and think that, you know what, I went through that because that's what fuels me.
And look at the success you've made in your career. I mean, so many people who are going through what you went through can look at you as someone to aspire to follow.
Hopefully. I mean, I've always said that, wrestling was my saving grace because, there was this wrestler. Her name's Trish Stratus. And I just looked up to her, you know, she was pretty, she is smart, you know, and she was really good with the mic as well. You know, she was just a complete package, right? So, you know, I just thought, I'm like, I want to be just like her. So, you know, if one day, you know, someone is going through the hardship that I went through, and then maybe they'll see this video and, you know, think that, you know what, like, I can be that one day. And hopefully I am a beacon of hope for other people, because, you know, like Trish Stratus was my beacon of hope.
That's fantastic. And
Yes.
and the champion now, it's got to be the world next, surely.
Hopefully, you know,
Yeah.
global takeover.
So is there anything else other than wrestling that you would like to achieve in your life now? You've achieved so much. I mean, goodness, I'm not going to ask but you've achieved so much. It's astonishing, really, isn't it, to watch you in perform, and the successes you've had and the fame you've had.
I mean,
it must be so exciting.
There's still more definitely to achieve in wrestling. You know, I still want to get to that next level and see where that takes me. But, you know, with acting as well, I definitely want to see where that takes me, and, you know, just not look back.
Well, Gisele Shaw, what can I say? Thank you so much for joining us on Education Magazine
Thank you so
today.
much.
So I'm sure that those watching will be inspired by the wonderful work and achievements that Gisele has achieved. And I'd like to just thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it for
Thank
having
you.
me. Thanks.
Well, what a story that was. Welcome back. And Charlotte, what did you think of the Gisele story? I mean, what an amazing woman who's overcome such a crisis in her life to get where she has today. Isn't that quite a story?
It's fascinating stuff, Mike. It really is.
I mean, I'm so proud of her. It's amazing. Rachel's one of our team in the education team. Rachel, what do you think about what you've just heard?
It's a brilliant story and inspirational to all children.
Quite. And I got a surprise for you all, because here she is. She's with us still here.
Hello.
Gisele, good to have you back.
Thank you for having me again.
And of course, we've been talking about the anti-bullying week that's been on since the 16th to the 20th of November. And Sinclairslaw, I'm proud to say, are proud sponsors of that event. Here we go. We got the certificate, Rach. What do you think of that?
I know, it's brilliant.
What do you think of that?
It's amazing.
The anti-bullying week. And so we've supported it. United against bullying. And of course, that's what we're talking about today, bullying. Charlotte.
Yeah.
And we have got quite a story today, haven't we?
Yeah, exciting times. Really compelling stuff today, haven't we, Mike?
Yeah, and I'm sure you're very impressed with our new studio. What do you think?
It's beautiful.
We don't do things in half measures.
It was a complete surprise, because I haven't seen it before.
I know. I wanted to surprise you.
I love it.
Well, welcome everyone. Welcome. And as we are talking, and I said there's going to be lots of news in store for us today, watching this magazine show, and we're going to be talking to a parent who's been through a terrible crisis, and in fact going through a terrible crisis. And we're also going to be talking about the news, things that are happening in the education news at the moment. And my lord, there is something big that Charlotte's going to be talking about. And maybe, Charlotte, what do you think? It might actually help people realize that there's a route other than the court, maybe, to get redress. What do you think of that, Charlotte?
Yeah, I think that's right. It's about complaints procedures, and this is a case where a complaints procedure was very effective for somebody who had a justified complaint against their local council.
Yeah, and Rachel, what have you been looking at? Have you got?
I've been looking at the news generally for the UK as a whole. We're all separate in different policies, and the government today, unfortunately, in the last few hours, has actually pulled some funding for LGBT children in schools. It's a policy that's been going since 2014, but for whatever reason, despite the times and social media, it's been pulled. And
the LGBT community, of course, often as children, when you're at school, can be a real problem for so many, because they can get bullied, terribly bullied. And well, that brings us to one of our first guests today. I know, having heard the wonderful Gisele telling us about your story and what you went through, thank you again for joining us on that. And we're going to be talking to a brave father who has really been through the mill, and we are anonymizing him, and we're going to be calling him Craig, and he's not going to be participating on the video itself, but you'll be able to hear him. And I think he's with us at the moment. Craig, are you with us?
Hello, Craig. Sorry, hello, Mike. Yes.
No, my name's Mike. Craig,
thanks, sorry, Mike.
Well, listen.
Yeah, I'm wonderful, thank you.
It's absolutely wonderful, Craig, that you've joined us today. And I know that you have yourself been through the mill as a child, haven't you? I mean, you went through bullying as a child yourself.
Yes, I went through it from a young age. I'm now 45, so I had speech and language problems growing up as a child. And back then, I don't think there was the understanding, there wasn't the support in schools. So obviously with my speech and language problems, I became an easy target, I suppose. Unfortunately, from the generation I was in, I was brought up in a sort of household where if someone was to hit you, you hit back, you defend yourself, which then led to further problems where I was then labelled as a naughty child. And I think like as we get to within today's schools, we're looking at the actions and not the reasons of the child. So whereas I may strike back and defend myself, I was just seen as striking out and not the reason why. Whereas for myself, I was protecting myself, I was being bullied, and I wasn't prepared to stand for it. Now, unfortunately, my son's now going through it. And obviously I've learned from my past, and we sort of try and take that more. We talk about our problems, we don't fight back. There's right ways of doing things and there's wrong ways of doing things. And now I think we find ourselves in a position where as much as, yes, we have moved on, I would say slightly within schools, there's still a lot of very old-fashioned problems within schools of keep away from that child. And we're not actually dealing with problems. A lot of schools are trying to brush it under the carpet. And I think they're more concerned about their reputation of the school rather than actually dealing with the problems.
Well, Craig, tell us a little bit about what you went through as a child. You said you were bullied. Were you physically bullied?
Yeah, it was very sort of physical, hands-on. It would be a case of people would make fun of my speech, which would then heighten my anxiety, which would then make it harder for myself with my speech. My speech would then become worse. So that tension would build up inside, which would then lead to pushing and shoving, would lead to, if I was attacked, I would then lash out. And I was unable to explain myself to staff because I would go sort of that high to a level, I wouldn't be able to communicate towards staff. So I felt my only way forward was to protect myself, and it would be to lash out. Because I didn't have, I would say I never had that capability of being able to explain what was going on.
And as an adult yourself, did you, what did you do later in life? I think you went on to become a bouncer at nightclubs, is that right?
Yeah, I sort of on and off over 20 years, I became a doorman. I worked in various areas around London and Essex. And in a way, I think in some stages, I then became, if I'm honest, I became a bully. Not necessarily I would target innocent people, but if I was then working a club and if someone I felt was coming to me or they was attacking me or they thought they could take advantage of me, I then felt, well, you know what, it's not going to happen. You're going to get something in return. And I think that was influenced by what I went through school.
Really?
Yeah, because I just felt like I wasn't going to let anybody target me again. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. My way of dealing with that was the only way I knew, and that would be my fist. And obviously the line of work I then went into, it was very confrontational. It was physical. Some of the venues I worked, some of the pubs and clubs, they were very rough places. And that was part of the job, basically. That was, you expected that. And it took me a long time to, I think, realise I was actually, in a way, living a lie. I was being someone that deep inside I really wasn't. I wasn't that person. I didn't want to live a life around violence and lashing out. I actually wanted to sort of show the true me. So yeah, and that.
Well, I mean, Craig, you probably might have seen the VT with Gisele Shaw, who's taken that aggression out on the stage there, and in the ring. In the ring, yes. Yeah. I mean, do you actually relate to what Craig is saying? Do you understand that?
Oh, definitely. You know, it's just, I don't want to say it's like PTSD, you know, because like I haven't been diagnosed or anything, but you really do have times in your life where you think about it, you know, and there's just everyday stuff that you go through in your life that makes you remember that stuff. But, you know, again, you grow as a person and you just keep moving forward.
Yeah. Well, Craig, do you actually relate? You relate to that, what Giselle's been through? She was bullied terribly when she was a child in Canada, and of course became a national British champion on the wrestling stage. So she a bit, yeah, amazing. I mean, and tell us about what you've been doing, Craig, because I know you're working very hard in youth work to try and help and encourage others who are going through this kind of crisis themselves.
I work as a youth worker. I also work in a special needs school, which I wish I'd done years ago. They're two jobs I love. And one thing we have set up, I've set up 3 football teams, and I aim to make them inclusive football teams. So these are for children with special needs, additional needs, and from mainstream. We're trying to break down that barrier and bringing our children together. Same as we would with any other sort of community or within any other type of diversity. I want to bring our children together so we can educate each other. My son's got additional needs, and the one thing the majority of our children say when they've got additional needs is, I just want to be normal. And what they see as normal is what every other child is doing. We run boxing programs. I've got children who've got ADHD, I've got children with autism, I've got children with challenging behaviour, and also I've got children who've been bullied. So it's not necessarily that physical element of it where, oh, we're going to teach you to be tough. We've got some children who can be actually think they're really out there, they think they're tough, and we can actually bring them down a peg or two, and we can teach them the basics through boxing of respect. And we pair them up with someone who may be a complete opposite to them, and we use their confidence to actually bring someone who might suffer with anxiety to bring their levels up, and we can help build confidence. So we've got children who may be bullied, and we're not teaching them to go out and stick up for themselves and do what I used to do, but what we're doing, we're helping them by using sport to build their confidence. And if they can hit a punch bag, or we've got a child who's going out and getting in trouble on a weekend, and we can say, well, you can either go out on the street and get into a fight and get yourself in trouble, or you can come with us. Let's get some pads out, get on a punch bag. Because I know from a young age, when I then started doing boxing, I could cope with things a lot easier.
Yeah.
And a lot of youngsters I'm getting now, we're getting a lot of positive work with, because not only do we do the boxing, but then after we do the mentoring as well. So after each session, they know they've got somebody that if they say, Craig, can I come and have a chat with you? Can I have 10 minutes? We'll go and we'll have a drink, we'll have something to eat, and we can talk things over. And some of these children, they may not have that in their home life or within school. They may not feel they've got anyone they can talk to. And I think that is a key, where they feel safe and they're able to talk to somebody that they trust and they feel is going to listen to them.
Oh, that's
fantastic. I think that's most children want.
That's fantastic, Craig. I mean, that's so rewarding to do that. I mean, Rachel, one of the things that Craig is about to tell us, I know because I've spoken to him before today, is the difficulties that often inflict so many parents when they are trying to tackle bullying, with schools trying to distance themselves and refusing to admit it.
Well, all state schools are supposed to have a policy for behaviour, and they should, obviously it'll vary between every school, but they should always follow anti-discrimination law. No child should be victimised, no child should be harassed or made to feel different And that is why a lot of children are bullied, for the differences that they are showing, for whatever they may be.
And this is why you're worried about what the government is announcing with the LGBT community.
Exactly, yeah, because those children are being brave and trying to show their true self at a younger age than they may believe. You know, maybe their parents feel is an acceptable age, but they want to be loud and proud, which is what the gay rights promote. But unfortunately, that's just not happening. But you know, what do you see in schools, or what cases do you do that have made a difference with bullying?
Oh wow! I mean, it's far-reaching. I mean, Charlotte and I have worked on lots of cases, Charlotte, haven't we, with bullying, and I've succeeded in getting very substantial damages for children who have suffered it, and it all emanates from a school refusing to admit what has happened. And then Craig, one of the things that you and I talked about before we came on to do this show was the crisis that's confronting you at the moment with your child. And obviously we don't want to name names or the school, but please tell us a bit about what your son is going through at the moment.
Well, at the moment, I actually sent my son to the school where he's at, because they do promote themselves as being very good with supporting SENDs, so supporting children with special educational needs and disabilities. And they're very proud of themselves for promoting that. So I thought, I want the best for my son. So we got him into the school. Unfortunately, sort of from the beginning, we've sort of had a few problems. One in particular, my son has suffered with his confidence for a long, long time. He was in a music class. The music teacher at the time asked, are there any children who don't know their alphabet? Now, for my son to come forward and put his hand up in front of a class of children he didn't know, because it was early on in the term, took a lot of confidence from him. He put his hand up, and the first thing the teacher said, I bet your parents must be very proud of you. Maybe I should give them a call. Maybe I should phone home. Oh, no. Now, that upset my son beyond. And this is supposed to be a school I should feel I should be proud to send my son to, where he's going to be safe.
Good heavens.
There.
How did you know about this? Did your son come home and tell you this, or did you learn about it weeks later?
He eventually told me, which I contacted the school. As you can imagine, I was upset myself. They said they would look into it. They would speak to the teacher involved. In my opinion, not a lot was done. But I thought, with it being early on within his first year at the school, I didn't sort of want to start pushing anything. I was hoping it would just be a one-off incident and we could sort of move forward, and she would sort of think about what she said. From there, again, he was sort of struggled in class. When he would try and ask for assistance, he would then get kids making fun of him, which then led him to now feeling he can't sort of ask questions in class. And he slides back into sort of shadows, if you say, where he just goes through the stages in class. He's not actually understanding what he should be learning. His quality of work has been affected because he's too embarrassed to ask for help in class. And it's sort of gone from there. And then this year it's escalated further to where it's now become physical, where a set of children have started recording on their phones, and they've then pushed him into another student deliberately, who has then retaliated and attacked my son. This has been filmed and then shared amongst the other students within the school. I didn't even find out about this, also taking into consideration my son has epilepsy. So if he was to have took a knock in the head, it could have been more serious. And heard nothing from the school. I only found out through my son. One of the students took a copy of the recording that they were sent to the head of their year, and they made them delete it. Now, their school policy is any recording on the school site, the schools are removed from that child and the parents or carers are to come in and collect it. The child kept her phone and all she was told was delete the footage.
Sorry,
when
sorry, Steve, did you say that she was told to delete the footage?
Yes, from the head of year.
Who, by the head?
The head of year for their year group. So, as you can imagine, again, I was upset. I was then told, when I requested to speak to the head of the school, I was then passed from one person to the next. I was getting a deputy head of years. It just went on, different people. At one point, I had a member of staff who phoned me up to say it was just unfortunate he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. My son was in school trying to get an education, and they've told me he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I took my son out of school for his own safety. The following day, I received an email with the school policy explaining to me that parents aren't allowed to just take their children out of school without prior agreement with the school. So they was more worried about his attendance rather than him being attacked in school.
And did he suffer any injuries, Craig, when he was attacked? Was it physical?
He said he was a bit sore, but it was the emotional effect it had on him. We now go where we've got a local park. He will say to me he doesn't really like to go over there because of kids from school are over there. And I've also heard, like, especially with the music teacher, I've heard from other parents, because obviously my youth work, it's in an isolated incident. She's also made similar remarks, and apparently she's not very nice with other children, and these are some of the children with disabilities. So it's not an isolated incident. And yeah, again, I informed the school I would be going to the police because I wasn't happy with the way they was responding. They said it had been dealt with. I asked what punishments had been given out. They refused to give me information of the punishments. They said we can't share information. Now, I wasn't asking for the children's names. I wasn't asking for addresses. All I wanted to know was if I felt the punishments that suited what they had done for my son. They've humiliated him. They refused to give me that information. Now, so for that reason, I said, well, I then need to take it further because I don't feel confident within the school dealing with it. I feel you're trying to brush it under the carpet. I reported to the police, only to then find out they found another child with footage of the attack, which I had said, I'd informed them of their own policy, only to find out they told that child to delete that copy as well. So that further confirmed to me that the school's just trying to cover it up. And I think, unfortunately, there's too much of it in mainstream schools. They're more interested about the image of the school than they are about protecting the children. And I wouldn't just say this isn't just about the victims of bullying. This is also about providing support for the bullies. Because like I said at the beginning, we're looking at the actions, but we're not looking at the reasons. So as much as, yes, we need to keep our children safe, we also need to give that support to those children who are doing the bullying and ask ourselves, why is it happening? What's going on in their life that makes them feel that that's the way they've got to live their life, if you know what I mean? Is there something that's so terrible in their life that they feel they're releasing it out on others? And I think this can only be done in schools with the right support and understanding. My son has special needs, and if we go back to the core of it, if we go to the very beginning, when teachers are training in university and they have to do placements within the 4 years of their degree, let's make it so they have to do a year in primary, a year in secondary, and then go do a year in a special needs school. So even if they go into a mainstream setting, they will have some understanding of the individual needs of children with disabilities. We need to educate our teachers more as well. And I myself, I work in a school.
And Craig, I think, sorry to interrupt you. Craig, you were saying also, I think, that you're a big campaigner to try and install in our schools an equivalent of the Parent Teachers Association for children with special educational needs, like a special needs association of parents, so that they can all collectively make a voice together to pick out when things are going wrong and when things are not working for their education healthcare plans and things like that. I must say I agree with that.
Oh, most definitely, because I think, especially if you've got a child with special needs, as much as being a parent is hard for anybody, when you've got the added problems of day to day, whether it could be your child might suffer with anxiety, just getting them to get ready and go to school could be a challenge on its own. To get your child to walk out the door because their anxiety levels are so high, or you've got parents who may not be getting very much sleep because the children may have ADHD, autism, things like that, and they may not sleep. I think it's too easy for mainstream schools to brush parents off with a smile and, oh, we'll look into it. Our parents need to feel they've got someone within a school unit where they can go to and they will be listened to and supported. Now, I think as we have a PTA in every school across the country, we should also have, like you say, something similar, but where we can have a SENS PTA who work alongside the school PTA. It's no good with PTA members running a SENS PTA, because if you don't understand what it's like to have a child with special needs, you're not going to fight that child's battle 100%. Whereas we can work together with a SENS PTA and the school PTA can bring them together, and at least every parent with a child with special needs will know they've got somebody in that school they can talk to, who are going to listen, and it's not going to be brushed under the carpet. Because eventually someone is going to...
I'm sure that we all agree with you. I'm sure, Gisele, do you agree with that? A voice, for a collective voice for children going through this, not just the PTA, but children with special needs, having a sort of collection of parents being able to speak up for those who feel a bit fragile, not able to do so.
Yes, definitely. You know, as like as a kid, you know, you are fragile already, but you know, with added you know, needs as well, like that's very important that, you know, they are heard as well.
Yeah, quite. Yeah. Craig, thank you. Please stay with us, because I'm going to bring Charlotte in and we're going to talk about some practical steps that you might want to think about in this crisis, because a number of you probably watching this might be going through this right now and wondering what the kind of thing that you might want to do in those circumstances. Craig, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing that story. I know it's been very difficult for you to be able to say that, and it's very painful for you recounting the experiences you had as a child too. I thank you for your frankness and your honesty and transparency in relation to this. So, Charlotte, are you still there?
I am. Hello.
Charlotte, I mean, what a story. I mean, the idea that that there is a school learning about this terrible episode where a child has been bullied physically, and there's footage that's circulating on social media and on cameras, which the school have instructed witnesses to conceal, to delete. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not immediately obvious to me what the justification for that would be. The thing that immediately sprang to mind, I guess, well, I mean, because I sort of look at all different angles of the situation, I suppose the only question in my mind was whether somebody had misunderstood some sort of GDPR aspect of things or something like that. But I mean, if there is an allegation that somebody has been bullied and there is evidence relating to that allegation that might shed light on it, you would expect that really to be retained. And if there was some reason why it couldn't be retained, then you would expect somebody to take a note of it or to take a photograph of it or just do something to try and retain it. So it's not obvious to me why that would happen.
But it seems to me that the very fact that here is a school that's seen this video and, as you say, could have made their own note verbatim of what they saw, like a statement, but that's not forthcoming. And when we hear from Craig, it's not as if they're saying, look, oh yeah, we saw this video, we saw it ourselves, we saw the children involved, it's child X, Y, and Z. It's the suppression of the evidence that really concerns me. Doesn't that worry you?
Yeah, I would really want to know why it had happened. I mean, it's hard for me to understand why somebody would have evidence of something that happened and not just sort of look at it and use it to form a view as part of their investigation. That doesn't really make any sense to me at all. And obviously, from a parental point of view, you would be pretty anxious about that, wouldn't you? Because inevitably you would be saying to yourself, well, is this, you know, how is this being looked into? And you always have a problem, I think, as a parent, which is that your child, you know, the person you love and prize above all other people, is telling you that they are in danger and that they don't feel safe. And what you want to be able to do is reassure them. And how do you do that in those circumstances?
Well, I think the simple thing is you would expect firstly that the school will help you and put together the package of information that they've been receiving and help you pick out the culprits and discipline them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think it's rocket science.
No, I would agree. It's as I say, I cannot think of a good reason why you would delete something that might shed light on an incident that had been complained about. I really can't.
No, quite. I mean, one of the things that I think we want to get across in this broadcast also is to talk about the practical things that we might need to tell parents like Craig who have a child in that situation, the kind of steps, the typical practical steps that they might want to do. Have you got any ideas of some practical steps there, Charlotte?
Well, the first thing I think is that it's a small but practical thing. I would be writing things down. So I would, a lot of the time with these situations, you have a child who is coming and reporting very frequent incidents of bullying. And what I would be doing, I think, is every time my child came into once it had sort of reached a certain level, because I think one of the challenges is, firstly, and obviously Craig's way past this point, but one of the challenges, I think, at least in the early stages, is you're sort of saying to yourself, well, is this bullying, or is this young people maybe going through puberty, just getting used to socializing? You know, is this just them sort of, you know, not kind of interacting very well, but is it really bullying? But once it becomes clear that you're really talking about bullying, I would be, as a lawyer, I would want to have evidence to put forward to the school. And one of the best ways to form that evidence, I think, is for the parent to just write down things as they're happening, and ideally to prove that the notes are contemporaneous. So, you know, I think it's quite nice. You could send an email to yourself. That's the thing I do when I want to record something contemporaneously. You send an email to yourself saying, my child came home and told me this, and you just write down as much detail as you can. And then when you get to a point where you're going to the school to say, this is what's happening, you can say to them, look, I haven't just pulled all of this together at the last minute. Here is my pack of evidence. Here are my notes of what my child has said to me as my child has said it. So you can look at these, you can see the progression, and you can also see that they are happening day by day by day, because I have recorded them that way, and I've made them, you know, because I've sent myself an email, there's no doubt about when that happened. So firstly, I think evidence gathering is important. And one of the reasons it's important is that most schools now have information management systems, and they should also be recording incidents of bad behaviour by children, or difficult times with children. All of that should be recorded on the school's information management system. But obviously, as a parent, you have an advantage, which is that you have face-to-face time with your child all the time, whereas the teacher won't necessarily independently record all of those incidents. So I think keeping your own information log is really, really important.
Well, let me tell you, Craig, what I think you should do. I would be writing directly to the school now and saying in a letter, dear sir, you will recall that I complained in relation to my son who has sustained serious bullying on such and such a date, whereupon a group of individuals assaulted him, and the evidence of that assault was recorded on a series of camera phones that you instructed the witnesses who took the footage to delete. I then saw fit to report my concerns, given the fact that you did not address them, to the police, whereupon I learned further that you that there was in existence a series of other camera footages of this incident, and that in accordance with your instruction, you instructed that child or that parent of that child to tell their child to delete evidence of a serious assault upon my child. What is your explanation for this? Question mark. Charlotte, what do you think of that? I just dictated a letter for Craig to send to the.
No, it might be that I've misunderstood your previous question. So in terms of where Craig is, I think at that stage, yes, you're talking about invoking the complaints procedure of the school, which I think is a sensible thing to do. The other thing that you could potentially do is you could, it depends what kind of school it is, obviously, but if it's a mainstream maintained school, for example, you could potentially also involve the local authority. There are safeguarding officers at the local authority that you could talk to if you're concerned that your child...
And warning notices, Charlotte, as you know, the warning notices, a school that loses control of the health and safety of its pupils, or they're supposed to be in charge, loco parenti, of the children in the school, losing control of the health and safety and the behaviour of the school can be resulting in a warning notice that the local authority can issue to the school, which can have all sorts of repercussions, whether you're living in Wales or in England.
Yep.
Well, I would be asking for that. I mean, I think it's extremely, I mean, what do you think, Rachel? I mean, astonishing.
It is ridiculous that there isn't a rule that covers all schools. They should all be complying to the same rules overall, and not just having different policies depending, because you could move from one school to another to try and escape the bullies, but that school might then be worse and more tolerant. And it's brilliant to say they look at what's happening in the background of the bullies' families, which can be very important to try and resolve. But you'll see that they try and push the children together to make friends, and sometimes those children are never going to be friends, and that's making things even worse.
I think that Craig also had an amazing idea that there must be a lot of parents out there who are worried and are concerned about maybe things like their child's special education needs not being met, and being able to turn to a group of like parents who together can form a voice. I'm absolutely all for that, Charlotte. What do you think? I mean, I think there's something. Craig has hit the nail on the head. It's really a good idea for a group of parents, like a PTA, to get together and stamp out and help resolve and to speak up and to even celebrate when it's necessary a school that's doing well with special educational needs and with bullying, and schools that are not. What do you think of that?
In the sense of parents at the school coming together to talk about difficulties that their children are having.
Yeah, like a group, like a trade union, if you like.
Yeah, like a sort of support group. I think that could be a really valuable source of support, and it could also be really helpful for the school. I mean, obviously, ideally, you would like groups like that to work. I get, I mean, in an ideal world, everybody would sort of work with everybody else, wouldn't they? So you'd like to see some liaison between schools and those parents. I mean, it hadn't really occurred to me to wonder about the extent to which PTAs do include representation for children with SEN, actually. So that's a really important point that Craig's raised, because we know that schools have to have a SENCO, so they have to have somebody who coordinates special educational needs provision within the school. But it's interesting to think about where the counterpart of that is in terms of parents of children with special educational needs.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, an amazing topic, and we've got a couple more things to talk about too, and not just bullying. We're going to be talking about what's been going on in the news. Now, Rachel's mentioned one big topic about the cutting of funding, and of course a parent. Charlotte, tell us the latest story that's been coming out in relation to supporting or a complaint that led to quite a heavy award in favour of the parent. Tell us about that.
Yes, so this is a report that we've seen about a council who's been forced to pay a considerable amount in compensation, almost £20,000 actually, by the local government ombudsman. So the background to this is that this is a child with special educational needs who ended up missing out a lot of his senior school. So obviously children, whether they are neurotypical or whether they have special educational needs, children of compulsory school age should be educated full time unless there is a very good reason not to do so. And what happened to this child was that he, at his first secondary school, he had a combination of complex diagnoses, which our clients will be only too familiar with: Asperger's syndrome, ADHD, and PDA. And because of that, it probably won't come as a surprise to hear that he struggled in mainstream. The council did put in alternative education, but they put in part-time alternative education. That education was put in with an unregistered provider. So in other words, not a school or an institution that is registered as a school. Now, eventually, this boy started at a second secondary school, but there were 3 years between him leaving his first secondary school and going to his second. He didn't have a full week's education until March 2020. So between 2015 and 2020, he did not have full-time education. And what the Ombudsman did was they really looked at the way the council dealt with it. They identified a number of issues with the way that the council had dealt with the mother's complaint. What the local government ombudsman does, obviously, is look at complaints from parents and decide whether the council has acted appropriately. And in this case, the ombudsman said, well, the council seems to have understood what was going on and where the failings were. It just doesn't really seem to have done anything about it. And what the ombudsman did in the end was order £20,000 compensation for the schooling that this young man had missed. Now, one of the other things I think that's interesting about this, Mike, is that Michael King, who is one of the local government and social care ombudsmen, actually said in a press release that they had upheld 91% of detailed investigations about EHC plans in the last year.
Good heavens. I mean, well, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
And that's interesting, I think, because people tend to see the ombudsman route as not necessarily being the most direct route to redress.
I think we probably see that, Charlotte, don't we? We see it so often that local authorities, parents even, they get their education healthcare plans and their local authority just ignore them.
Sadly, I think there are many parents out there who get their EHC plans and say to themselves, yes, that bit of the battle is done, and then they find out that actually there is a further battle to get everything that is specified in the EHC plan. I mean, now the ombudsman is not a quick remedy, and there will be many cases where going to the ombudsman will not be an appropriate remedy because it's not going to get, you have a child who needs an urgent resolution. And also the ombudsman's remedies are in some respects limited, but still this was a really interesting case, I thought.
Absolutely. And I suppose, do you know whether the council are appealing that decision, or are they going to be challenging it?
No, I believe that they have agreed to the compensation and they've also agreed to offer an apology. So I don't think that they are appealing it.
When you look at it in that context, though, and you think, well, actually, £20,000 sounds a lot of money, but £20,000 for that amount of years of failing, it's not really that much, is it?
Over 5 years, it's not. But I think that the perception of most people is that the ombudsman and also other, like the adjudicator in higher education, there's a perception that these are not really proper remedies, and that at most you'll get a sort of token payment and a kind of, sorry, not sorry as a result. And I just think it's interesting that in this case I agree with you, does that represent full-time education lost over 5 years? Well, I suppose we don't know exactly what the part-time timetable was, but that's the kind of sum from the ombudsman. That's the kind of sum that makes you think the ombudsman really must have disapproved seriously of what happened here.
Yeah, quite. I mean, and also what's happening in the university world, because we know that a number of you and I have had a case where we argued that a medical student should have legal representation if they're ever accused of being unfit to practice or to be terminated in some way, a disciplinary process. I think there's some recent news from the court on that too, isn't there?
There is. So this is the case of AB against the University of XYZ. And obviously there isn't really a University of XYZ, it's just that the court has chosen to anonymise that judgment. So we don't know who the university is, and we don't know who the student was. So this was a case about disciplinary proceedings which were brought against the claimant AB whilst he was a student at this university. And the allegations were serious because they were allegations of non-consensual sexual activity with a student of another university whilst this claimant was abroad. They were both abroad on the Erasmus scheme, and whilst they were abroad, this very serious allegation came to light. And there were a number of issues in the case. So one of the issues in the case was that the university had applied university regulations and a sexual misconduct policy which had come into force after the incident. So about a year afterwards, they were using rules that had not been in existence at the time. And effectively the way that was resolved in this case was there wasn't really much difference between the sets of regulations. So the court didn't make a huge amount of fuss about it. And certainly there was a contractual point about whether you were entitled to update your policies as a university. And that of course turns on the terms of the contract that you have. Now, one of the big issues, and one that I think, Mike, you and I were really interested in, is whether the claimant had a right to legal representation in these disciplinary proceedings. Because what the regulations said, and this isn't uncommon, is that a student is entitled to be accompanied by somebody, but they often draw a distinction between being accompanied and being represented. So being accompanied means you've got somebody there to support you, maybe take a note for you, you can confer with them in breaks. Being represented means you have somebody who speaks on your behalf, asks questions on your behalf, makes representations on your behalf, although you may also speak as a witness. So being represented is a very different kind of thing to being accompanied. Now, in this case, the university regulations said that the disciplinary committee had to comply with natural justice, and also that there was an implied term of the contract that the disciplinary process must be fair. And what the court said was, well, these standards of procedural fairness are the same as are applicable anywhere in public law, and particularly where the university is providing publicly subsidised education, because obviously the taxpayer subsidises university education, even though students now have to get a loan and pay fees, that's provided as a public service. And so basically, the court said, well, it's for us to determine what fairness requires as courts. And whilst generally courts have been reluctant to say everybody in disciplinary proceedings is entitled to be represented, in principle, there can be individual cases where you do need legal representation if the proceedings are going to be fair. And so in this case, the question was the failure to permit legal representation a breach of natural justice? And the court looked at this question fairly carefully. It applied some factors in a case called Ex parte Tarrant, which is a famous case about whether legal representation is required or not. And the court concluded that in this case, this claimant was entitled to legal representation because of the seriousness of the allegations, because it was quite a sort of serious allegation that the claimant was facing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite a case, that, because I mean, people don't really realise that when they enrol themselves into university, the university, particularly if you're pursuing a professional qualification, dentistry, law, medicine, the university exercises this sort of supervisory control over their conduct, and they can make a decision that could in fact eradicate that person's chance to ever enter that profession. And people don't really realize that when they're choosing universities, because they think, oh well, it's good, it's all going to be fine, and they never look at the small print where they're not given allegations of this kind of made in university, and there's freshers weeks and all sorts of things might happen in freshers weeks. People might drink too much, behave badly, and then get booted out of their course and their career. So Charlotte, thank you for that update. That was particularly interesting, and thank also to my guest today, and of course to the wonderful Craig who joined us, and thank you again, Craig, for telling us that story, and thanks Charlotte for the update, and of course thanks to the wonderful Gisele for joining us too. And what do you think of that? I mean, all this information.
Very educational.
Yeah, right, absolutely. Rachel, well, have you got anything else to add before we sign off?
One thing that I would say is that Scotland are doing a much more concise approach to bullying and monitoring. What they look at is if an incident is reported, then they look at if that child then has a lot of absences, and they see if that correlates to whether the children are off on the basis of, you know, being upset in school. So
like a proactive duty.
Proactive. So, and then they can deal with it as quickly as possible if there is that information coming out.
North of the border is better. We need to be we need to be learning a lesson from Scotland. Well, thanks for that, Rachel. That's very interesting. And again, what's in store in the next episode? Well, we're coming to the end of this edition of the Education Magazine, episode number 2, and we're going to be going on to, in the Christmas episode, we have got quite something in store for you. We're going to be talking about education healthcare plans, and we're going to be talking about groups of people, particularly those who are suffering from cancer, who are being let down. And we will have some guests on who will be discussing that, the terrible ordeal that they face when they are encountering chemotherapy and being denied and having to wait for support services. So join us at the magazine for that. And we're going to be joined by a very prominent guest. And that only leaves me to say thank you all. Thanks to all my guests. Thanks to Rachel for joining us today and stepping in for Chris McFarland, who would normally do the news too. Yes. Thanks also to Charlotte and Giselle. You heard all of this, and thank you for joining us again. I'm very grateful for you for coming in twice now and helping on that. And I know a lot of people will be inspired. And Craig, don't forget, there are people out there who are going to be undoubtedly inspired by your story. So thank you too, Craig, for joining us. And I do wish you and your son all the very, very best. And please, if you want to contact me about your son's case, about something you have, write in that letter. You're very welcome, and I'll help put that together for you. So thanks for that, Craig.
Thank you very much.
Right, well, thank you all for joining us, and look forward to seeing you again next time on the Education Magazine. Bye-bye.